Welcome to another episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Our co-hosts, Sri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage with consumers online, in-store, and everywhere in between. And now, here are Sri and Peter. Hello and welcome to the CPG Guys podcast. I'm PVSB, the ACOS CPG guy. I love discussing brand loyalty, retail, and CRM. And my co-host, he's the ROAS CPG guy, and an expert at direct-to-consumer, retail media, and marketplaces, among many other things. Please join me in welcoming the Bronx Bomber himself, Sri. Sri, how you doing today?
Peter, I'm doing awesome, but we got to follow the rules of the show. ACOS, ROAS, help us. What does it mean?
I know that ROAS is return on advertising spend. Sri, what's ACOS?
Average cost of sale on Amazon.
Yep, that's part of our rules here, people. If we throw out an acronym, we have to define what it is, because there are a lot of people that don't know and may be a little afraid to ask. We never want that to happen. We want to bring people along for the journey. So thanks for that, Sri. And before we get to our guest, I want to remind our audience that all of our content, including our series on profitability, the Women's Leadership series we did last October that helped us raise $8,000 for the Susan G. Komen Foundation, our Founder Series, all that can be found by visiting CPGGuys.com. It's a really expensive price at $0, so pretty much anyone can afford that. And hey, who doesn't love free, right? Pretty good deal. Also, be sure to keep up with all the content we're generating. We like to amplify that on LinkedIn, so just go to LinkedIn and enter in the term CPG Guys. If you're on the video and you're looking at Sri, you can see it spelled out on his shirt. But it's CPG Guys, and when you get there and to our page on LinkedIn, just click the follow button, and that way you'll be up to date on everything that we're talking about on LinkedIn. All right. If you are a fan of this podcast, and if you're listening, we know you are, you know how much Sri and I believe in measuring the performance of brand media investment, particularly in the wake of pandemic-driven growth in digital commerce. Search engine marketing is only part of the investment that brands need to consider in ensuring their products are visible to shoppers across all e-commerce sites, including if they have it at D2C site. So understanding and measuring the key drivers of SEO, or search engine optimization. See, Sri, another acronym I broke down. At a retail level will help brands invest in the content that will ensure product placement, ideally on page one of results, which we know from research we've seen will improve sales by 50% or more. So very important that SEO is dealt with just as SEM is being invested in. Earlier this year, Sri and I were very honored to be guests on the Digital Shelfcast, one of our favorite podcasts that helps growth-driven CPG e-commerce leaders win in e-commerce. It's produced by the team at e.fundamentals, a leading digital shelf analytics provider for CPG brands looking to analyze, measure, and optimize e-commerce performance. So joining us today in this episode is the founder and CEO of eFundamentals. Please help Sri and me welcome to the podcast, John Maltman. John, greetings. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
We're very excited to have you. We're big fans of the podcast and the content you're producing. We think it's great. More voices, more opinions, all talking about the industry that we love. We're going to include a link to your corporate website in the digital liner notes of this podcast, so we'll spare you the effort of having to spell it all out. We're also going to include a link to the Digital Shelfcast and the episode that we'd appeared in, so people can hear that. But before we get started with our questions, it'd be great if you could provide us with an overview of the solutions that eFundamentals offer, and kind of like who your client. I'm assuming it's consumer packaged goods brands for the most part, but who you're. Yeah, so love if you could just give us a brief overview of your business.
So we work in the digital shelf analytics space. We work primarily for CPG brands. That's our area of specialism. In the US, we cover over 40 retailers. And we're answering three questions. The first is, are my brands being sold and marketed effectively through online retail stores? The second question, which is a good follow-up, is what can I do to improve that position? And then thirdly, and this makes us unique, is that we then say, what can I say to the retailer that will help them improve their category performance online. We think that's a big build that's really important. So we have eFundamentals, a core product. We also build scorecards for our clients so they can measure their improvements, particularly in the area of content and search for internal reporting. And finally, we pump our data into our clients' data lakes. There's a lot of fantastic data science going on using our data.
I love data science, John, given my background, so that's really good to hear. I'll also say I know Sri has told me many times that he thinks the biggest miss for category captains on the digital shelf is their ability to really contribute to what the experience is like, what drives search, everything else. So I think what you're trying to do is addressing that huge gap that Sri has recognized. So terrific. Let's get right into the questions. I'm going to start with just some background, John. We'd love to hear about your journey to creating eFundamentals. You have what I'd consider really blue chip experience in CPG and retail. You were nearly a decade at P&G. You did some consulting work at Glendinning, which is morphed into, I believe it's part of Kantar now. More CPG work at a place that Sri and I spent some time, PepsiCo. Retail work at ASDA, and some customer data experience at EYC, which is now which was the precursor to Symphony Retail. So 6 years ago, you decided to go away from the W-2 world, at least someone else's W-2, and create that in the U.S. that's the paycheck stub you get from working for a company versus being an entrepreneur. But in any event, you decided to found eFundamentals. We'd love to understand the market conditions you thought were conducive to creating your business and ultimately what you'd hope to offer these clients that you were cultivating.
Happy to tell that story. So at the time, I was running a consulting business that worked with global CPGs in the area of category strategy and supplier relationships, joint business planning, etc. And it just struck me that I had a number of conversations with senior sales and marketing leadership where we discussed their business performance in physical stores. You could get chapter and verse. So not only what the performance was to a P&L level, but also what was driving that. And they'd use the same set of measures as everybody else. So depth of distribution, frequency and weight of promotion, position in store, share of shelf, etc. But when we came to talk about the e-commerce business, apart from it's growing and who wasn't, it was much harder to pin down, are we winning? Is it sustainable? Is it profitable? Do we have a defensible position going forward? And it just struck me that what was needed was a set of fundamentals, the things you have to get right to win in online retail stores. So with my team, we set out to identify what those were, and we identified 8 fundamentals that were extremely important. And then I had my aha moment, which was, rather than have a consulting product, let's build software. Let's build some software that will track those fundamentals continuously in our clients' key customers and give them not data, but insights that will help them to generate a more competitive, more sustainable position. And when I looked at what was on the market at the time, because this was, even then there were products that had been in the market a number of years to do this sort of work, it just struck me that there was an opportunity to, there's going to be a big change in that I felt that if you were working in sales and marketing, there would come a time when you just had to understand omnichannel. And the tools that were around at the time were really just data pipes, was my view. And the sort of data that would drown a key account manager or a brand manager or a revenue growth manager. So I set out to look at the key roles in the CPG and figure out what are the insights they need to make better decisions. And we try to bring that insight to them in ways that are highly intuitive. So we deliberately use ideas that are already familiar to those key frontline roles rather than develop up a new kind of science or a new quasi-science. And then finally, a lot of the discussion was about the data, and I think that you have to have good quality data to do this work. I wanted to make the discussion about return on investment. So we deliberately set out to make return on investment our key deliverable to our clients. And we challenged ourselves to generate at least a 4 times return on investment for our clients. Our average last year was 10. Our best so far this year is 29 times. And that because we know how to take the insight and operationally turn it into an action that can make money for our clients.
You talked about 8 fundamentals that you referred to when you started answering Peter's first question, but the rules of omnichannel commerce have been changing rapidly, as you mentioned, as brands and retailers seek to embrace this journey in grocery with strategies and capabilities. Why don't we dive into what maybe some of those 8 fundamentals that you're recommending to your clients to explore in this digital roadmap?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it seems to me that a lot of the debate is on content. And I think content is almost just entry price to be effective in this area nowadays. And you have to have great content. I worry about when I hear people saying, oh no, we're focused on fix the basics, we're focused on content. You should be past that now. You should be really on top of that. It's really important. But there are lots of other things to think about in terms of online. And first of all, if I was running a CPG business, I'd be really interested in profitability and in particularly mix management. And by that, I mean, what are we selling within our assortments? How much of that is done on deal versus done at full price? And are we selling the right packs and the right brands? And are we being able to execute our category strategy, particularly where we're trying to add value to the category by, say, premiumizing the category by offering better products? I would be very concerned about availability. I think one of the fastest ways to undermine your own sales is to have poor availability, particularly online, because online shoppers will switch. And once they switch, you're in their favorites list, and the cost of switching to you is very high. And in particular, we see promotions reacting differently online. Promotions that were simply would normally be a shelf edge ticket in a physical store, maybe get 10% or so sales uplift. Online, in particular retailers where the search results are influenced by promotion, they can have much greater visibility, driving much higher levels of sales. And we see the replenishment systems, even of the most sophisticated retailers, not keeping up with that. So driving high levels of out of stocks. And that is a fast way to lose money. And then I think that the other piece is, my last trip to the US was to visit the National Retail Association's conference in New York in 2020. And I spent most of my time looking at the retailer exhibits, seeing what was interesting retailers. And many, many retailers were talking about the cash cow that advertising, the digital advertising was going to become. And I think for CPGs, it's extremely important that you build expertise in knowing what to pay for, what works, and how to and when to use it, and when to use it alongside the other sales levers, pricing, promotion, sponsorship, etc. And I think that's a big ask. So our fundamentals are designed to work in those areas. We have fundamentals that are focused on content. We try and make that as simple as possible. And the second is looking at search and making sure we're winning in search. Then there's 3 fundamentals which are all about, am I pricing right, am I promoting right, and do I have the right assortment? And when I say right, I mean at the category, brand, and item level. Because if I want to influence my retail customers, I have to talk category if I'm going to be influencing their strategies. And then finally, we have 2 fundamentals which are a bit more forward-looking. So what are shoppers saying about our products and competitors' products? What can we learn from that? Not just from the product point of view, but also from the supply chain point of view as well. And then finally, a fundamental, which is all about executing your category strategy online. Is my category thinking getting through? Is the retailer supporting my category strategy? And just to give you an example of that, if you go and search for coffee in Walmart and just look at Walmart grocery, just have a look at what's presented on page 1 versus what's presented on page 5. And you'll see the category premiumize as you go from page 1 to page 5. But that effectively that means is the shopper's being presented with lower value, and I'm thinking of a value in terms of cost per use basis, than the products as the front of search. We see many, many instances of that where the search engine, when you stop taking a brand view and take a category view, is actually down trading categories. And that's really interesting. And of course, from a retailer's perspective, that's money on the table potentially.
John, that's terrific, and some wonderful insight you're able to share with our audience about how retailers are positioning their search and why brands need to lean in and provide those kind of insights back to the retailers so that they're not leaving money on the table. You know, a company's success in e-commerce is really only as good as the team that's activating against it. So you're kind of in a unique position to see the good, the bad, and the ugly across different brands. So from your perspective, what skills does an e-commerce team need to develop in order to win in the digital shelf?
Well, first of all, I think the e-commerce team should be very much on top of content and search. They should understand both of those, and they should be experts in that. And the particularly given the amount of money that's shifting to paid search. But then I think there's a strategic question that needs to be addressed by CPGs. Because I would argue that in the new world that we're going forward, if you try and funnel all your e-commerce work through a dedicated department, it will not be big enough to respond to the needs of the market, no matter how much money you can afford to pump into it. And the time has come to think about upskilling the frontline managers, the customer teams that are serving the big retail customers, the supply chain folks, revenue growth management, to take the insights that can be generated from e-commerce and apply them to the business. So I think the new roles for many e-commerce teams, over and above the content and search piece, is first of all understanding and developing best practice, putting in place the tools and the capability to support the frontline managers, and then getting to work upskilling those managers to be able to leverage that capability and the tools. And it's extremely important in doing that the technology is directly tied to the commercial agenda. You should be thinking about how can we have better joint business plans with our customers? How can we make sure our brand launches are A1 in terms of online delivery when the presence when they're launched in store? How can we make sure that the assortments that we're offering our customers are totally valid in this new omni-channel business? And the reason I think it's important to switch from very much a specialist focus to educating the business is because now you need that level of participation to be able to execute at the speed and scale that's required within the market. We did some research before we launched in the US, which was January 2020. We did some research. We talked to about 40 CPG business leaders who were working in e-commerce. It was interesting, the Jan-Feb parts of that research, many companies were hyper-focused on Amazon and Walmart, and maybe providing others, doing some work with maybe Kroger, Target, but it was a very narrow focus. And fair to say, there were many companies where Amazon, in fact, was a mile ahead of everything else in terms of what we're doing. By the time we got to April, everybody has switched to how do I help all of my grocery retailers who are now getting serious about e-commerce? Because we need to, it's an area we now need to win in. And I think that's one of the biggest shifts. And to do that, you need an organizational strategy, not a specialist strategy.
You know, speaking of that very change in grocery here, at least in the United States over the last, let's say, 15 odd months, we've seen a new player emerge in a significant way, which is called Instacart. Instacart is now entering other markets. I know they're going to Canada, probably United Kingdom, And Instacart has saved the valuable purpose with stores kind of being closed or restricted hours or hygienic concerns of being able to get your delivery of your groceries to your house. If but however, if I wear a brand's hat, am I thinking this is short term? Is this long term? And then to me, it represents the best shot of building a basket versus e-commerce, which tends to be largely single units. As a brand, how should I be thinking about Instacart and what would you advise brands to be successful to get their products into an Instacart cart? No pun intended.
The It was really interesting to me. I did a conference in the US, sort of the second half of last year, which was very well attended. Three of the attendees were from Instacart, and it was interesting to me that they were listening to a conference that was largely aimed at brand owners, particularly grocery brand owners. And I think Instacart is an extremely interesting proposition. And I think that their future depends on them to some extent. And let me explain what I mean by that. The more they can demonstrate to brands that they are adding value, the longer their future and the better prospects for their future is. So I was really interested in their announcement recently that they were providing the ability for manufacturers to manage content directly with them. I think that's super smart. And it allows the brand owners to really invest in content, knowing that that content will get distributed effectively and not having to worry about the integration with the retailers and the retailers' integration with Instacart. So I think that will generate a lot of effort to get great content onto Instacart. And I think that one of the things I think will happen over time is Instacart will want to attract more and more of the advertising dollars to itself. And to do that, they're going to have to do what other players in this market, like Google, for example, have had to do, which is demonstrate very strong return on investment. And the moment they can do that, then they will get large streams of revenue, media revenue towards themselves. And I think it's in the interests of both Instacart and the CPGs to see this as a potential partnership. It's really interesting. There are a lot of smart things that they're doing, and and I think that if I was running a CPG business, I would see them as a strategic partner. But one that's developing and one that is going to change over time, and I'd be ready for that. In terms of making sure I was winning right now, the first thing I'd worry about is availability. If you want to appear in search in Instacart, make sure your product's available for purchase. And I would certainly make that my number one priority. The second thing I would do, and I think this is not just an Instacart thing, but with Instacart, it's practical to do. I'd do a ton of A/B testing. I really would be looking at trying everything and seeing what works, because there will come time, and it will be relatively soon, when shareholders will worry about the flow of money into digital media, and they will want to see high levels of return. And I think Instacart is part of that. And I think that companies like Instacart, and we'll talk about Walmart too, I guess, have an opportunity, which is to exploit their effectiveness by making a point of it, and then for attracting money through high rates of return.
John, you opened the door. Let's walk on through. Walmart. It's another major competitor in grocery e-commerce here in the United States. Would love your point of view on their strategy to win in grocery by reaching shoppers seemingly any way they can. Does their physical store presence present an advantage to Walmart in this pursuit over other competitors?
Well, let me start with the second part first. I think their physical store presence is a huge advantage. And the reason I think that is, first of all, they have the capital of it already deployed to fulfill across the country locally. Secondly, they have the need to make their stores work effectively. So if they're losing traffic to stores because of online ordering and pickup, then they need to use that space. So they have got a possibility of not only having a capital already deployed they can use effectively, but they have a possibility of having a profitable basis for that business if they can figure through how to complete that sort of last mile replenishment piece effectively. So I think the physical stores are a big advantage.
John, from everything you've said so far in the previous 5 questions, here's what I'm taking away. Your advice to the industry is treat your e-commerce business like you would your in-store business, which is start with the category. You are the first one, which I completely agree, and it makes no sense to me that brands don't do this, but you're the first one that really has said on the CPG guys, when you think about your in-store display, think of search and kind of combine them as one strategy. That's the way go forward. And you heard it here, folks, from John himself. Shareholders will soon be asking the value of all these activities, e-commerce activities, and the investments going in them, especially on the search and media side. So folks, start sharpening those pencils. All that in mind, John, the next question logically therefore would be assortment. And how would you advise brands to optimize their assortment on the digital shelf? And is there a difference really between online category management, offline, or is it all just category management at the end of the day?
I think that's a very good question, and I think that the added complication nowadays is the whole thing about in-store picking and in-store replenishment, because you now have a competition between the replenishment system and shoppers, and that can lead to a very bad shopping experience, and that has to be fixed. So it needs to be figured out. How do you create an environment where both activities can go on simultaneously and both be done well? And I think what that will mean is simpler assortments, less items. And if I was a retailer, I'd be looking at the pandemic, and if I only learned one thing, I seem to maintain my sales with much less availability of items than I had before. So I'd be questioning the need for all of the assortments that are available. And I think that if I was running a brand in the middle tiers of the category, which is more or less a me too to either private label or the leading brands, I'd be worried about that. So I think there will be a compression of assortment, largely to create space for replenishment without impacting day-to-day availability for shoppers. And I don't think anybody's figured that out yet, but I think it will get figured out because it's really important. The other piece is that online ordering creates an opportunity for a different layer to your assortment, which is the bigger packs that can be purchased and handled without having to fill up your trolley with the product and then fit the rest of your shopping. So I think that there's a real opportunity to think about what are the new pack sizes that we want to bring to the market to support the online shopper. I think there's many categories where you can get people to buy bigger pack sizes. And also, going back to the earlier comment, I do think that as the balance in terms of online ordering versus in-store shopping has shifted, that it's time to rethink promotion strategy. And I think what you might well find is less promotions and more money going to getting products in front of people with great visibility. If you then think about the underlying profitability of the category for the retailer, that could only be a good thing if that was to happen. So, because I think that's the big challenge is for the retailers how to create a mix and a blended shopping experience that delivers sustainable levels of profitability.
John, Sri and I agree with you that there's going to be some serious SKU rationalization coming because I don't see, this is what I can say, I don't see retailers increasing the search results so that you can get 300 products on the first page. So in the absence of that, so many products are going to fall onto the second and subsequent pages. And we all know what happens when your product isn't on the first page. Your sales suffer. And so making sure that you're focused on getting the products that matter most to your shoppers onto the first page of results is going to benefit a brand. So Sheree and I are baseball fans. So John, I'm going to throw you a pitch right over the plate. I know you can knock this out of the park. Why don't you share with our audience how eFundamentals is helping to automate digital shelf analytics for its clients and drive success in brands looking to enable their strategies?
So when we built eFundamentals, we started not with the data, we started with the jobs, with the work. So we looked at the role of the key account manager, the brand manager, the category and shopper marketing folks, revenue growth manager. And we said, look, which insights can we bring to these people as they do their job? And we looked at the business planning cycle, so the stuff they have to do every day, the monthly reporting, quarterly planning, the annual business plan, the joint business plan. And we used that to say, what are the insights that we can bring? So the first thing we do with our clients is make sure that the right people are getting the right insights. The fastest way to slow things down is to give everybody everything all the time, because I haven't met a customer team yet that thought it was underworked. And they don't have the bandwidth to basically try and decipher stuff. They need to know what's important and what do I do about it. So getting the insights is important, but also establishing the ways of working so that people know how to routinely take those insights and turn them to action and make money from them. The next layer on, though, is really interesting, because the digital shelf analytics started mainly as a sort of descriptive analysis. This is what's going on, and does that very well. I think the next generation of tools will try to get much more into prescriptive analytics that say, stop doing this, that is not right. So these promotions are not working, or this pricing strategy is off, or these items in the assortment are missing from this retailer and it's really important and it's holding back their category sales. So we're really interested in that whole area of making people's jobs easier by giving them an answer to react to. Now, there'll be a decision to be made, but getting into the answers business is very much where the technology is heading. And even to the point of saying, look, there are some elements of our insights which are better delivered to you via an email the minute we see something happening, rather than having you log on to a service and look at the dashboards and all the rest of it. So things like price changes, for example, or promotion moves. So we're constantly looking to make folks' lives easier so that they can spend time figuring out how to apply the insights to make better returns for their customer. But you need these two things. You need a great analytics tool that's delivering insights, and you need to establish the ways of working so that you can execute at scale. And that's how we help our clients the most.
This episode will be incomplete, Peter, if I don't reset the baseball analogy to one in John's land. John, I believe you're in the UK, so we're going to call that a Ben Stokes Yorker, not a fastball pitch.
Right, there you go. And there's absolutely nobody in the US who understood that. So
Yeah, but John and I recently enjoyed the England-India series that took place just let's say a few weeks and months ago.
yeah, some exciting cricket there.
And as we go to question number 8, the last one for today, all of the learnings that you've just discussed, if you were to summarize it, and worldwide we're emerging from the transformative period of the pandemic, are there any insights you are closely monitoring or any leaderboard alerts you're monitoring and any such leading indicators that are emerging, such as is the in-store business re-emerging?
Yeah, so I think that it's interesting to keep an eye on what happens in Asia and see what happens to different categories, because I think what you are seeing and will continue to see is the split between online and in-store changing at different rates in different categories. And I think you'll see that in Europe and the US as well. And I think there will be categories which without denigrating the category, which we see as low engagement categories, which people basically categories that people understand incredibly well and make very quick choices when they're in store. I think those will have high penetration, or categories where the pack sizes are large or where you're buying, a month at a time's worth of product. So I think they will be very resilient. I think other categories, which are higher engagement categories like baby food, for example, people do want to see what's new. They do want to understand the alternatives. I think that those may switch more back towards in-store shopping. But I do think that the new levels are set to continue to rise over time. I don't see a huge fallback, but I think it'll be a bit more variable. And the reason I think it'll continue to rise is retailer driven. I think that, and particularly in the US, many retailers have now understood that the e-commerce part of their offer is extremely important. And there's been a mindset shift, which was that in the past, there was a lot of work within retail which was about making it efficient. So, standardizing images, for example, that type of thing. I think the retailers have now said, no, we need to offer the best shopper experience. And our shopper experience will be differentiated from other retailers. And as people work against that and the shopper experience improves, in particular, the offer gets more and more curated towards me as a shopper and the way I live and my family lives, then I think that there's opportunities to expand online shopping even further. So I'm very, very optimistic about the prospects for continued growth within this sector, driven by what I think is going to be tremendous creativity on both the retailer and the brand side.
I want to remind our audience that all of our content, our podcast and audio format on 40 platforms. If you're heading to the beach this summer and you're downloading audiobooks on Audible, we're there too. We're on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, just about everything you can imagine. We're also on YouTube if you want to watch the video and see our smiling faces. We have other tremendous content like the list of our favorite podcast we listen to, one of which is the Digital Shelfcast, produced by e.fundamentals and John's team. Well, just go to cpgguys.com. It's all free. And if you'd like to give us some feedback, because we are an audience-driven platform, we use your feedback to determine who we invite on and the topics we discuss. Just go to ratethispodcast.com/CPGGuys and leave us a review there. And if you're so inclined, a star rating. I personally like 5, but it's entirely up to you what you want to give. So, John, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. This has been a tremendous conversation. As I mentioned earlier in the podcast, we're going to have a link to eFundamentals' site and to the Digital Shelfcast in our liner notes. But we really appreciate you coming on and doing this kind of rank punditry conversation about what's going on in the industry right now. Really appreciate it.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure, and I hope I get the opportunity to repeat it sometime in the future.
Listen, you've got some great insights, and that's what we like to bring to our audience. We are an education-driven podcast format. Hey, Shri, what'd you think about today's conversation?
My favorite part was the Ben Stokes Yorker. What about you, Peter? Just kidding.
Yeah, you had me at that, Shri. I have to give it to you on that. That was terrific.
I have a big takeaway, and I don't want to use words like wake up call, but I think it's a big statement that John has made. And if you were listening to the podcast, all 8 questions, the big takeaway today is not so much that there are 8 fundamentals which John has described and the industry has kind of been flirting with for like 10 years at this stage, everything from content to assortment. But the big message John gave was you got to think of this e-commerce business just like your in-store business end to end. It starts with the category and it's builds down to what assortment fits where, and do you really have to take everything you made for the in-store business model in eaches and sell it online, or are we going to see this differentiated strategy for assortment, which is you see the bigger pack sizes moving away from the store to online? And my mind actually starts thinking of the plethora of opportunities for stores in that kind of model. So thank you, John. That's a very good call out, and I think one that brands should particularly pay attention to. The second one that you stated, John, was how retailers now understand this is integral to their business. So brands do have to play catch up and kind of integrate into that ecosystem.
All right. Well, everyone, we really appreciate you joining us for this episode, and we look forward to continuing the conversation on the next episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Thanks and goodbye.